Well, for the economic implications of this high-stakes summit, we're joined now from Copenhagen by Jonas Parello-Plesner, a senior advisor at the Rasmussen Global Political Think Tank. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. It might sound basic, but just really reiterate for us, how important is China to Europe?
China is really important to Europe. It's one of our biggest trading partners and vice versa. So it really matters to the Europe as a whole. But in that, there are, of course, big differences among the countries. And the country that really matters most, that has the largest exports to China, that's Germany. So I think for France, it's always been a lot about creating this sort of EU front and creating a unity with Germany. So we see Macron. Actually, if we take a step back, at an earlier visit, he had both the Chancellor Merkel and the European Commission President Juncker that joined him in Paris to sort of show the Chinese that there's a united Europe behind some of the economic demands. And the same on this trip, he actually has German businessmen also in his delegation and the German Minister of Education. So Macron has at each step with the Chinese been trying to take that sort of European and also really bringing in Germany that has sort of the biggest voice in the economic relationship with China.
On a broader international scale, China has, of course, been embroiled in a long-standing trade war with the US. Could a strengthened relationship between China and the EU try to help repair some of that damage, I guess?
There's that side to it that I think the EU is really trying to work with China on the WTO, the World Trade Organization, saying you need to help us and together we need to fix it. Otherwise, we have on the other side of the Atlantic President Trump that's willing to break it. So if you don't show progress on some of the economic issues that where Europe is actually in agreement with the US, China should do more on subsidies, should do more on intellectual property rights, should do more on forced technology transfers, all these issues. But if we can address it inside the WTO, then that would definitely be the best. That was also one of the messages in Macron's speech earlier today in China, that we need this to do this, not as sort of the law of the jungle. On the other hand, Europe is also just looking out, and Macron as well, for our own interest, meaning that if there is a bigger trade deal between the US and China, Europe doesn't want to be left out. There is some sort of agreement agreed there that sort of locks us out. So I think that's the other aspect of this sort of triangular relationship.
Talking about Europe's interest and particularly Macron, at the end of this three-day meeting, what would be seen in Macron's eyes as a positive outcome?
I think for him, it's really a big step on economy and then climate change. That seems to be the sort of the big two priorities he set. So both on the Paris climate agreement and then on making sure with on the economic side that some of the, I think EU is ready to conclude a deal on geographical indications, in French, the appellation d'origine contrôlée, which matters a lot in France, which basically says that a champagne is only a champagne if it's from France or from that area of France. And that's something that China now signs on to a bigger degree of respecting. So I think that's also on the economic side something that really matters.
Europe has been a little bit worried, or cagey at least, about kind of increasing interference from Beijing. Might this summit help to remedy some of those fears?
I think that's a little bit of a separate track, how Europe sort of deals with that China, led by a one-party system, is also increasingly you could say interfering, meddling in what we can talk about abroad. I mean, in the sense that businesses, as we saw in the US with the NBA, that they can be sort of threatened by China if they speak out on issues that China deems sensible, such as Hong Kong, Taiwan, or human rights.
Thank you for speaking to us, Jonas Parello-Plesner from the Rasmussen Global Political Think Tank.